you go buy all the things you need. Maybe you have lunch together, ice cream, whatever it is. And so it's hard to recreate that kind of experience, that fun experience online. And given that we didn't get to do that last year, parents didn't get to do that last year, they're going to try and make up for that even more this year.
Hey gang, it's Wednesday, September 1st. Suzy and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily and eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. I'm Marcus and today I'm joined by one of our principal analysts who covers everything retail and e-commerce. It's Suzy Davidkhanian.
Hey Marcus.
Hello there, how are you?
I'm great, how are you?
Why you said hello Marcus like you weren't expecting me to be Hello Marcus, why?
Hi.
When did you?
How's it going?
I'm good. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you ready for this episode? You sounded very unprepared
ready
for anyone to be on the show. Okay. All right. Cool. Let's do it.
Thanks for calling me out.
No, of course. You're welcome. Today's fact: houseflies live for about a month or two. Great. I thought they only lived for about a few days. Come to find, they might as well have also signed the lease. They're staying that long. What?
What's the difference between a housefly and a fruit fly?
I don't know. I think fruit flies are really small, and that's the limit. That's where my knowledge ends. There are a lot of different types of fly, though. I think like hundreds of types, which no one really is excited about learning. But I learned that the other day. They also have a 360-degree vision, which is why it's almost impossible to try to get them. So you can literally see everything, and their reaction speed is 4 times faster than a human. Remember watching a documentary years and years and years ago, and they showed what it looks like when a human tries to hit a fly. From a fly's perspective, it's like if someone tried to strike you in slow motion. Just don't bother. Flies are the worst. They're not the worst, but they're the worst. Anyway, today's real topic, back to school shopping.
Woohoo!
What a transition. Perfect transition. Well played, Marcus. All right, folks. So we're talking all about back to school shopping today. We're going to go through the who, what, where, when, why, and how much of back to school shopping. It's more the kind of where, how much, when, and a little bit of what they're looking for. So it's not as thorough as it sounds. Strap in. Anyway, when asked back in June 2021, which best describes your kids' schooling situation, most, 38%, said in-person classes. It's back in June 2021. No, it's a Nielsen study. 33% said a mix of in-person and virtual. 14% were virtual only. 8% homeschooled. Most of them, 35% of kids, were virtual. So now it is in-person, mix, virtual only, homeschooled. So that's the backdrop of what's going on. Kids are going back to school in different places. However, National Retail Federation's Senior Director of Industry and Consumer Insights, Catherine Cullen, remains optimistic, saying, quote, "We are already seeing strength in consumers due to large retail sales at the end of June, stimulus checks, and the child tax credits. This could be a record-setting back-to-school season." Close quote. Towards the start of the summer, the NRF predicted that back-to-school spending is expected to reach a record $37 billion. Total back-to-college spending is expected to reach an all-time high of $71 billion. Suzy, I'm wondering if you share Miss Cullen's optimism, because it seems that on one hand that people are very unsure of what back-to-school means for their family and their kids. On the other hand, people like the NRF are saying we're going to have a record-breaking year. What's going on?
So this is a question I have been asking myself for the last few weeks. And I think so this is what keeps me up at night, the back to school season. It's the second largest season after the holidays. So it is really, really important for retailers. And I think that a lot of the survey work that happened was in May, June, before Delta really took off and people were concerned about it. So I'm surprised that the Nielsen study found that parents are bracing for virtual or hybrid learning already in June. What I think is clear is that every single, including eMarketer forecast, is showing growth. And that's probably for two things. One, last year, a lot of parents didn't buy new things. Every student has outgrown their clothes and needs new supplies because they were all spending their money on technology and slippers. And so I do think that just by nature of last year being a bust, that there will be growth this year. And I think the optimism that we felt at the beginning of spring and the beginning of summer sort of has maintained a little bit because as we've seen with a lot of the Q2 earnings that have come out, they are saying that back to school has helped spur spending. We know that parents start spending in July, so a little bit before the variant really kicked off in the media. And so they've already started buying things. And the Q2 reports for Target, Walmart, a lot of them talked about back to school helping with their earnings.
Yeah, so the when is interesting. So JLL's survey found over 25% of parents had started back to school shopping in June, 6% had finished. The NRF and Prosper Insights and Analytics found a similar share, 26% of all back to class shoppers had already begun to buy items in June. That was up from 21% in 2020 and 17% in 2019. Are we noticing some kind of a pattern here in terms of how early it just becoming earlier and earlier that people are starting their back to school shopping, or has this just been a weird couple of years because of the pandemic?
So actually, I think that's such a good point. A lot of the forecasts, when they talk about back to school, they are looking at July and August. But from a retailer perspective, they believe that back to school goes into September. And a lot of the research we did in my former life showed that in the beginning, kids are buying to their supplies list. And so a lot of the basics and the replenishments, then they go to school, they see what kids are wearing and they see what the new big item is. And then they start buying the more fashiony stuff. I think the reason why 2021 started with June purchases is actually not necessarily pandemic related, but if you remember, Amazon Prime was at late June. And I think a lot of parents used Amazon Prime, the Walmart and the Target sales to try and stock up on the things that they know their kids are going to need. And back then we thought everybody was going to go back to real life school. So all the supplies, all the stuff that they could get off their list, they did to take advantage of the sales.
Right. I thought maybe it was similar to holiday shopping, which typically is November, December, and now has kind of expanded and kind of stretched into October and even pulled even before that, maybe into September. Whereas this back to school, as you said, July and August is how people think about it, but maybe some of it being pulled into June, maybe it's an anomaly because, as you mentioned, Prime Day was there. Rakuten found a leading 36% of folks intended to start back to school shopping in July. 26% had started in June or earlier. So that means add those two together, 62% of people, nearly 2/3, had started their back to school shopping as of the end of July. Our retail e-commerce back to school forecast expects sales of over $41 billion this year. So that's up 13% on 2020, in line with pre-pandemic growth rates. Last year's back to school sales saw double that growth, up 26% on 2019. But where are people shopping? Let's talk about that for a second. Coresight Research estimates that back to school sales this year will be a 60-40 split physical digital. So 60 physical, 40% digital. For back to school shopping destinations, online and department stores were neck and neck, said the NRF and Prosper Insights and Analytics. So neck and neck online and department stores. And in March, marketing agency Tenuity found that 35% of folks plan to shop back to school in person, 30% of US parents said online, 25% hybrid, 8% curbside pickup. So most people said in person, then online, then hybrid, then curbside. Suzy, where do you expect folks to be shopping?
So I believe those numbers. I think given that in general, not talking about back to school, but in general, it's still the penetration of stores to online sales is really high, right? It's only in 2025 that we see $1 in $4 throughout the year being spent online. So it's no reason to think that back to school is going to be different. In fact, in back to school, taking those numbers into account, there's going to be more spending happening online than in stores. So I think that's really interesting to think through from a retailer perspective. It's parents are going online. It's easier. They know the stock is available. They don't have to go to the store, lug their kid. They're probably doing that, my guess is, for all of those non-fun items. And then all the fun items that you have to choose, like a backpack color or the design of your lunchbox, you're going to the store to look for it.
Yeah, a few more stats on the where. One study found that nearly half of the nearly 700 parents and students surveyed said they intended to shop mostly in stores for supplies versus 17% who said primarily online. So a bigger skew there. Another one, last year, 29% of back-to-school shoppers said they planned to make most of their purchases online. This year, that fell to 17%, according to Morning Consult. So most said last year, 29%, this year, 17% in terms of mostly online. And then Deloitte also found an overwhelming majority of shoppers plan to go to mass merchants for the back-to-school shopping. Online only, Amazon, let's say, was a distant second place.
It's not a surprise to see so many more studies showing that parents are going to go and shop in store, because back to school is a fun time, right? It's supposed to be cool and fun and a bonding experience and memorable for young kids, especially. And so that experience is much better translated in stores than it is online. And you sort of make a day of it. You go buy all the things you need. Yep. Maybe you have lunch together, ice cream, whatever it is. And so it's hard to recreate that kind of experience, that fun experience online. And given that we didn't get to do that last year, parents didn't get to do that last year, they're going to try and make up for that even more this year. And with the tax credits and all this extra money that they have, it just bodes well for people to go in stores. The wild card, as we know, is COVID. And how do people feel about that? And there are studies that show as the rates of COVID go up, consumer confidence goes down. And so you could potentially say, less people will go to stores. But at the same time, we know that there's a lot of geography that plays into that. And not every part of the US feels the same way about COVID and stores and safety.
Yeah. I know you were looking into the Delta variant variable. Did we find anything in terms of how that could affect back to school shopping?
I mean, for now, no. I think that parents are all set, whether they're going to have, I think it seems that mostly it'll be either in person. And we're seeing a lot of confusion and mixed messages in the media right now about mask mandates or not and what it's going to be like. But it seems that most parents would like their kids to go back to school in real life, but they are getting ready for hybrid. So that's why I think we're seeing that technology. I was surprised that technology is the number one spend. It's obvious because it's so expensive, but I thought parents probably bought all of that last year. But now they're getting ready for more of potentially hybrid model.
So maybe that explains why, the average spend, which makes sense because the NRF is saying it's going to be a record-breaking year. And so for that to happen, more dollars will need to get spent. And so how much people are going to be spending? Well, JLL survey found parents will spend 21% more this year on back-to-school shopping, averaging just over $350 per child, versus less than 300 last year. KPMG survey of 1,000 consumers expects an average of back-to-school spend to grow 9%, reaching $270 a kid. And if you look at by household, the NRF and Prosper Insights and Analytics expect families with kids in elementary school through high school to spend an average of $850 on supplies. That's up $60 on last year. And families with college students planning to spend an average of $1,200. That's up $140. Well, it depends where they're going. The NRF found spending on preschool was up 32%, college up 13%, whereas for middle school and high school, it was up just 3 or 4%. So a big difference in terms of which institution you are heading to. Suzy, you mentioned about parents wanting to go and shop for back to school out in stores as a day trip. It's also for inspiration. Marianne Wilson, editor-in-chief at Chain Store Age, was noting that over half of parents rely on in-store browsing to give them inspiration for back to school purchases. TV was a very distant second place with just over a quarter. And then it went Instagram, Facebook, TikTok in terms of providing inspiration. So it seems like that's not very easy to replicate, and parents need that.
Well, that, and I think also, yes, 100% parents prefer to go to the store versus, I think if you ask kids, they use social media for inspiration. But I think stores that are able to do like these shop in shops for college or for high school or for grade school, where everything is sort of set in the same place and parents don't have to walk the entire store, especially now with COVID, they want to be in and out. I think those are the stores that will be even more successful.
Yeah, in terms of by store, Ms. Wilson of Chain Store Age was noting that Walmart ranked as parents' number one choice, 64% for back-to-school shopping. It was in JLL's 2021 back-to-school shopping survey. Target was in second, 57%. Amazon, 44%. And then it went, Old Navy was way behind in fourth with 7% compared to Amazon's third place with 44%. So it went, Old Navy was fourth. And then it went Staples, Kohl's, Office Depot, Dollar Tree, Macy's, and Costco. Usual suspects for back-to-school shopping?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And not a surprise that Old Navy is so far behind the top three, because the top three have everything, right? That's not just clothes. They have supplies, they have electronics, they have the backpacks, but it's just so much easier. And while all four of them are known for value, not just low prices, but value, the idea that you can go to a Walmart or a Target and get everything you want in one stop is, I think, so much easier for parents to manage, especially with young kids. And then Walmart is doing some very cool things. I mean, they partnered with Justice, which is a teen brand for girls that was once extremely popular and I think is seeing a resurgence. So Walmart is working on their fashion component. And then they're working with TikTok to do some cool homecoming advertising and live stream shopping events and events in different towns. And so I think Walmart is really pushing as much as they can to be thought of as cool, which typically is the Target, right? Everybody thinks of Target as cool. So Walmart is really trying hard to take that space.
So you talked about value and price. So promotions are a big deal. Pun very much intended. Business. I may have actually put that together before the show. Business Wire found 86% of back-to-school shoppers said that sales would influence their shopping. 86%. 47% said once they are in a store, promotions influence what they buy. 38% plan their back-to-school shopping around specific promotional events. Rakuten agrees. They found 75% of shoppers plan to seek out offers for back-to-school shopping. So, Suzy, how do retailers stand out if everyone's doing discounts? What does all of this mean for retailers?
Well, I think 2021 is another crazy year because while doing sales and promotions is going to be important, having stock is critical. And I think given everything that's happening with the supply chains and there's all this delay, there's this huge delay and these clogged ports and other issues when it comes to planning out inventory that I'm not even sure retailers are going to have the opportunity to put things on sale because they're worried about their assortment. That said, I think what they can do to give the illusion of a good deal is by doing bundles and putting things together so that it's not necessarily like 50% off, but you buy 2, get 1 free, or you buy these 3 pens and you get an eraser or liquid paper or whatever it is that makes sense. Buy a backpack, get the lunchbox so that the consumer feels like they're getting a good deal and value. And there's a lot of research around there's a difference between cheap and value, right? Because people want to spend money on things that they feel will last and that they got a good price on versus the cheapest thing. So I think bundling and putting things together helps consumers feel like they're getting a good deal and good value without necessarily being a disposable item that you use it 3 times and you get rid of it.
So in terms of what matters to people, I think 2 points here. One, from some research, what are the biggest stresses for this year's back-to-school shoppers? If Media Group asked over 1,100 American adults on behalf of Retail Me Not, they found getting everything on time and shopping safely amid COVID-19 health concerns came in joint first in terms of the biggest stresses, 30% each. In joint third place was spending too much and dealing with crowds, 28% each. And in fifth place was finding good deals, 26%. Second point here, that same survey found the most popular priorities for back-to-school shoppers this year were making sure kids were happy with their purchases, 55%, buying items that will improve their kids' performance in school, 41%, and then budget efficiency, and then finding discounts were in third and fourth place. Suzy, final thing I want to mention here is the customer, because you're dealing with a very uncertain customer, a customer which is dealing with probably a lot of anxiety and a lot on their plate at the moment. And in July, former Insider Intelligence analyst Daniel Carnahan wrote a piece spotlighting the mental health of students. He pointed to a March poll from Navigate 360, which found that the majority of 16 and 17-year-olds in the US feel unprepared to handle their anxiety about returning to the classroom in the fall. He writes, quote, "It's important to remember that many students under the age of 18 are still not vaccinated, as the US only recently extended vaccine eligibility to those ages 12 and older. Marketers should be careful about the tone of back to school as that may exacerbate some of the concerns students may have about returning to in-person learning in the fall," close quote. So I think you still have to worry about tone here if you're a marketer.
Oh yeah. And I think right at the beginning of the 2021, the vaccines rolled out more quickly than we expected. There were stimulus checks. Everybody was very excited. And then the year started rolling in and there were these shocks that were happening that are not huge, but still, labor shortages. Now it's supply shortages. We're having this weird congestion at the ports that are happening now, the resurgent of Delta that people just don't understand how to handle. I think all of that comes together, and then there's inflation and the price of goods are increasing. And I know we're going to talk about that later. So I won't, we won't steal our thunder about that. But I mean, there's just a lot going on. And then you add to that, apparently this year, it's going to have the most kids that are going into kindergarten because the ones who were supposed to go last year didn't get to go. The parents didn't feel comfortable. So there's just a lot of stuff happening. And all of that at the same time, it's supposed to be like a fun, cool experience that some of these kids are just nervous about. They haven't talked to people. It's like, remember the time we were talking about the nerves of going back to the office and how people are worried about small talk. Imagine for kids who haven't been, they haven't been outside their pod and now they have to go back to 20% classrooms. So I think there's just a lot happening and marketers just need to tone it down and think through more around like convenience and safety and like having all the things you need on your supplies list. And like, this will make you feel cool, and keep in mind inclusivity and diversity, and just try and make this as easy as possible. And Target is doing these apps where you can, like, the lists are loaded. So it's supposed to help you as a parent, especially, figure out what to do, because it's stressful for parents too, for all the reasons we just said. And then you're trying to help your child through this difficult, uncertain time. Yeah,
maybe they can turn it down in terms of the volume on the celebratory tone and focus on some other things which are still important to folks, like making them feel comfortable, safe.
Yeah, like convenience, safety. I think we're all in this together tone is sort of overdone. So maybe thinking through something else, this return to normal too is kind of overdone because nobody knows what that new normal is. So I think that it's a challenge, but I think maybe then in that case, focusing on the product is probably better.
Right. I like Target's ad. I don't know if it was a back to school specifically, but they had one where it was focused on, this is what to expect when you get to the store. We're still cleaning things. We're still taking your safety and your health into account and as a priority. And so I liked that idea of letting people know what to expect when they get to the store. So thinking about parents for a second and how nervous they might be feeling, Slick Deals commissioned a survey of 2,000 American parents with school-aged children conducted by one poll asking what parents feel least prepared for. Number one was the cost of supplies, 43%. Number two was dealing with my child's separation anxiety. Number three was drop-off and pickups. Number four was school supply shopping. Number five, waking up early to prepare kids for school.
The one thing that I think is really important to remember is that obviously 2020 was hard and nobody knew what was going on. 2021 was supposed to start off as everybody was going to go back to normal. It's not. Back to school is a tough season for all retailers, even before the pandemic. There's just so many retailers offering items for back to school. It's so fragmented and you're just trying to cut through the clutter. And so as a retailer or a brand, and if you are just doing sales, that's not going to cut through it unless you're really offering the lowest price. And so then some of it has to be with like finding that it factor, that cool factor, and being, we were looking at some of the numbers for Nike. Apparently they didn't do as well as some of the other new it brands like Converse and Skechers, right? And so I think back to school is always a tough time for retailers. And now you're adding all these new uncertainties, not only from a health perspective, but also from an economic perspective. And so it just makes for a difficult period. But the good news is Q2, which includes a part of back to school, a lot of the retailers had a lot of positive momentum. And so I think it bodes well for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's it for the first half. Time now for the halftime report. We summarize the key takeaways from the lead story in 30 seconds or less. Suzy, your takeaways for the listener from this episode are?
The one thing I think people need to remember is that back to school is supposed to be fun. So make the experience as a retailer and a brand as cool and as memorable as you can. And that'll really help parents come to you.
That's all we've got time for the lead story. Time now for In Other News. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Vtex. Everyone is talking about digital transformation. What does it mean in real life? Digital Insider is a new podcast series about the digitization of retail, where business leaders, academics, and thinkers discuss how businesses are transforming and give their perspectives, practical advice, thought process, and lessons learned. Go to digitalinsider.com to learn more or listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, folks, we are back today in other news. Facial recognition surges in retail stores. What happens if prices keep climbing? And which retailer TV campaigns have set the right tone? Story 1. Facial recognition surges in retail stores, writes Kim Hart of Axios. That's why over 30 advocacy groups recently launched a campaign to pressure retailers to stop and or pledge not to use facial recognition technology. Ms. Hart of Axios notes that stores like Walmart, Kroger, Home Depot and Target have said they won't use facial recognition technology. Albertsons, Macy's and Apple stores do use it, however. Why are they using it? Well, primarily, it's used to stop bad guys from stealing things, but it can also be used to identify loyalty members and send them text deals, track customers to help tailor their store layouts, or employees to measure productivity. Suzy, which way will retailers end up leaning on facial recognition, in your opinion?
I mean, I think practically they're going to be using it for fraud and shoplifting, but I think that what they should do from a business perspective to really bridge the gap between online and in store is think through what one of the examples was around if you're coming into the store location. It's like basically location-based marketing. You come into the store, they've identified who you are, and then they help you either find the things you are browsing by telling you where it is in the store or by pushing coupons out because you've been browsing at something for so long that they want to elicit the behavior of purchase.
So a few things here for me. So the benefits sound cool. In China, shopping giants Alibaba and JD opened a futuristic grocery store where automated carts follow you, wrist trackers scan your items, and payments are made by facial recognition technology, notes Wired. But yeah, no transparency is a problem. Last year, Reuters reported that the drug chain Rite Aid had deployed facial recognition in at least 200 stores over nearly a decade. They've since ditched the software. Brenda Leong, Senior Counsel and Director for AI and Ethics at the Future of Privacy Foundation, notes that typically they don't link images to personally identifiable information, but still just the thought of someone capturing your image and doing something with it can be because your example of identifying certain shoppers who maybe kind of loyalty customers or something sounds good. It's easier to do if you're an airline and you can walk up to the seat of the person and say, hey, thanks for flying with us. We really appreciate it. We're going to offer you this perk today. It's a bit more creepy if someone just approaches you in the store as soon as you walk through the door and goes, you, Marcus? You go, who's asking? So
I think you're right, but I think in the small luxury boutique spaces, it won't be creepy, right? It's what you're going to start to expect them to do. I think in a large store, it'll be creepy. And then I don't think it'll be face recognition. And there are vendors that are doing marketing, like location-based marketing. I do think that there is the beacon technology that will really help with very large stores so that it helps you with geo-targeting. And so then it pings you when you walk into the Target and you're at the shelf, and then you can say like, oh, actually, I do want the Oreo cookie, so I'm going to get the coupon sent to me. So I think there are other ways of doing the loyalty thing in large stores that would help a customer feel heard and seen without it being creepy, because it's not vision related. It's not your face related. What I think is also interesting, which this article didn't mention, is apparently there are some, not apparently because I've seen them, there are vendors that do mood sort of reading so that the sales associate knows if you're coming into the store mad or sad or happy and can then get ready to greet you in the appropriate way. That I find fascinating.
Yeah, that's too much. Marcus, you're miserable again. Story 2. The Bureau of Labor Statistics just noted that consumer prices rose over 5% for the 12 months ending July. It had been the same in June. It doesn't sound like a lot, but from last summer to February 2021, it was 1 point something, before quickly climbing in the last few months to cross the 5% mark. So what happens if prices keep climbing? A new survey by data company Numerator found that 70% would cut back on out-of-home dining, including fast food. Then it would be out-of-home entertainment, with 57% of people spending less on movies, concerts, and amusements. Spending less on holiday gifts was in third, holiday celebrations fourth, and travel was fifth. Suzy, in your opinion, what are your thoughts on consumer cutbacks if prices continue to climb this fast?
So I think it's a no-brainer, right? All the nice to have, the impulse, the entertainment, all the things that you don't need to have to survive are the things you're going to cut first. I thought it was interesting that even candy and desserts made it into the things that you're going to cut potentially, but alcohol did not. So I guess there will be some impulsy things that you will keep because you have no choice in your mind, like alcohol, but everything else you're going to start whittling away at. And I think it's like, there are all these headlines around inflation swirling and the price of items increasing. And so people are getting nervous and they will start to make cuts. And if it's not even just the price of goods increasing, it's that there's just not enough things. And so it's this vicious circle of this imbalance of supply demand too.
To Suzy's point, yeah, desserts and candy, according to Numerator, were the first to be cut from the shopping list if prices keep going up, followed by prepared foods, premium or organic items, and then sodas or juices. Also, at the start of the summer, the central bank said that they expected inflation in 2021 to come in at 3.4%, as well above its 2% goal. Story 3, national retail TV ad spending has roared back to life, writes iSpot TV. From January 1st to August 15th of this year, over those 7.5 months, TV ad spending for retail brands reached $1.6 billion. That's a lot more than the less than $1.1 billion during the same time period in 2020 and $1 billion in 2019. Lowe's, Amazon, and Walmart all spent over $110 million each this year in national TV ad spend. Target close to $100 million. Those 4 retailers make up 37% of the industry's total in terms of retail TV ad spending. Suzy, what did you make of these numbers?
I was really surprised that Lowe's came in first from an ad spend perspective. But then when I looked at the list, Amazon and Amazon Prime, which I'm not really sure why they're divided, because after all, you're both pushing the Amazon brand. That explains why Amazon was sort of neck and neck with the next in line, which was Walmart.
That is all we've got time for. Thank you so much to my guest. Thank you to Suzy.
Thank you.
It took a long time for you to say thank you back.
I know.
Did you not mean
I'm so sorry.
It was like your heart wasn't in that one. Thanks to Victoria, who edits the show, and thanks to everyone listening. Tomorrow, Thursday, September 2nd, we have a webinar discussing how a new era of retail and e-commerce is emerging. You can check the show notes for the link for that. We'll see you tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX.